Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Hello everyone, good morning and welcome back to Points of View. Today's show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. And Lucy, I'll pass over to you to introduce the first story.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jasmine. So at the NASUWT conference that was held over the Easter holidays, several issues were discussed and debated, one of which was that 3 in 5 teachers, or almost 3 in 5 teachers that were surveyed, felt that a rise in misogyny was being fueled by the use of pornography in students and young people, and particularly social media influencers were causing the issue. Now, obviously, there's one name in particular that came up, and that was Andrew Tate. And the DFE is saying that they're supporting schools and how to deal with this. But there's a founder of a company called Men at Work called Michael Conroy, and he says that it is access to pornography rather than these influences that's causing the problem. And by watching this, the power dynamic between men and women that's displayed in pornography, for example, means that people are young people, therefore, the message that Tate puts out resonates with them. It means something because they can sort of, they've seen things like the things that he's saying, I suppose. And so if they're learning about sex through pornography and that power differential, then they are not learning how to respect women and how to actually respect one another as well. So to keep it short, because I don't think I need to go on about it too much. This isn't new. This isn't a new thing. But I suppose what we're looking at is who is responsible for dealing with this. So should it be the government? Should it be teachers and schools? Or should it be parents? How do we deal with this as an issue? So I don't know if you want me to give an opinion first or whether you should go. So
why don't you start?
Go on.
Okay. You start. On our 3 women panel, why don't you start?
So I have a few sort of feelings, sort of ideas about this, in that I think disrespect is a huge issue in all walks of society now. And I think that in some ways that has probably enabled and emboldened young boys to behave like this. I don't know much about these influencers. I only know of one. If I was to ask to name somebody, it would be Andrew Tate. I don't know whether there are other people who are putting out this same kind of content, these same ideals of how men should be and how women should be. So I'm not really aware of it in terms of the depth of the problem. But there are people who say that the algorithms are causing the problem. So when boys watch pornography, their social media, their computers tend to then lead them further and further down this rabbit hole, and I suppose they're finding more and more content that agrees with that worldview. But in the wider context, I would say we have to be really careful about seeing this just as a problem with boys, because we know that if there is disrespect in society, then just to focus on one aspect of it might be doing an injustice to all of the general issues that we have. So it's not just about women. When I was at school, I remember, noting over the 10 years that I worked there, the decline in behaviour and attitudes, and it wasn't just female staff. Kids didn't care anymore, and that was girls and boys. So there was already that disrespect, and I think that where that's crept in, I think their misogynistic behaviour has been enabled to sort of grow within that. So you two still work in education, so I suppose I would ask you, what are you seeing and what are you doing with it?
I was going to say, I think that Andrew Tate is somewhat beefed up to be more than what he is. I actually don't know many kids who support him in the way that I see in, posted or shared on social media. And I almost feel like some of the people that talk about him are out of touch. I think there are loads and loads of people on the internet that misguide children. I think just generally that there are a lot of people who've, either dropped out of school or, just don't promote education, but have gone on to make millions because of people that view their profile and the things they put out on the internet. And often controversy sells, whatever that is, whether that's misogyny, whether it's violence, whether it's promoting hate speech, whether it's promoting, fast cars, whatever. I just think there are loads of people who have made a lot of money on social media. And I think that does massively contribute to like an anti-school culture. But I think this stuff existed before Andrew Tate only came on my radar a few years ago. And I know there are people who say, well, actually, he's been on the internet for I never saw or heard of him. And honestly, I think it's very few people I can say who care about what he puts out there. And I don't actually think he's a representation of incel culture, because his lifestyle is actually very different to a lot of the hallmarks of incels. So to go back to what you were saying about who should deal with it, I think schools already deal with enough, to be honest. I think it's so unfair that, all the public services have almost been decimated, and schools are already the ones dealing with so much that pertains to children. And I think it's just unfair. Whenever we've done PSHE or, really specific tutor time messages, say in really important topics like sexual assault, I've always seen teachers. I used to be a union rep. I remember teachers that say, I feel really uncomfortable delivering this. I don't feel like I have enough training. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to be asked a question I can't answer, and I just feel like it's beyond teachers and schools. But I also feel like a lot of the politicians or the people who talk about what's impacting children aren't really aware of what's going on in schools either.
No, they're not. I would agree with the comment about Andrew Tate. I feel like he's become almost a caricature of himself. Yeah. And he's the name that people think of. He's the most famous one, but he's not who kids are following. He's not who these boys are listening to. And that attitude is absolutely everywhere. It's in Joe Blog's YouTube comments. It's in the things that they're actually actively following. It's in the overall disrespectful attitude that filters into everything, including misogyny, as you said. So I think we need to stop focusing on Andrew Tate and just let him wallow in obscurity somewhere. It's permeated everything. And I don't want to say everyone, but it's so much bigger and so much more widespread than just these few individual men that have monetized that attitude and that misogyny. And until we realize kind of the widespread nature of it, then nothing's ever going to change. But I would say personally, that the single biggest problem with education in this country and so many other countries as well is that schools are having to be everything in society. And we can't. Not only do we not want to, and that's not what we're trained for, we also don't have the resources, we don't have the time, we don't have, and that's what, no one signed up to be a social worker. I signed up to teach literature, and how to get kids to use apostrophes. I don't want to be dealing with this on a daily basis. No one does, but we have to. It seems to just be one other thing that the general public is trying to assume, I guess, that schools can just pick up, as if we have the capacity to do that, as if we're not doing things already, as if this has never been discussed before. Or what are schools doing to stop this wave of misogyny and violence? Well, we have been doing things, and it's not enough, because we can't compensate for what's going on in wider society and the reach of the internet and the failures in parenting and the myriad things that contribute to a situation like this. So whose responsibility is it? It's not ours. It's collective. You can't
Absolutely.
put it on schools.
That's what I would say. I think that it's quite likely, it's quite believable that, we're looking at a situation where, I've got it written down here, a quarter of 10 and 11-year-old and a third of 11 to 12-year-olds watch porn or have seen porn. And those are enormous numbers. And it's the availability of the material that's leading perhaps to these attitudes in young men that are causing problems. I don't know. I've not seen anything written down about girls accessing these kinds of sites, being interested in these kind of things. And like you
Can
said,
I just interrupt you? Sorry,
yeah,
sorry,
of
just for a
course,
sec.
yeah.
They do.
Right.
They do.
I would
Not necessarily with the same frequency or the same intention, but girls, teenage girls, young girls are absolutely consuming that content.
I would say it's also a different like taboo for boys and girls, because in my time in teaching, like one thing that I feel like has really changed on social, because my assumption would be that pornography has always been on the internet, and like even I was really small when, you know, we had access to the internet, but I never used to, you know, really hear about these things. However, now on social media platforms where people before just used to socialize and communicate, I've noticed that because they're not regulated in the same way as they used to be, there's a lot more like pornographic material or just really unusual things on the internet. Like for example, on Twitter or X, since Elon Musk has taken over, you know, the apps become just an extremely different place. And I've noticed in my time at school, for example, if I make a reference to some sort of current affairs in education that I've seen on X, if I mention that to pupils, I've had times where I've had boys in the class that are like, oh, like, you know, what are you doing on Twitter? Because their use of Twitter is extremely different to how I've used it, despite the fact that I was even in secondary school when I made my Twitter account. And, you know, I've noticed that shift on social media where before you could use a social media app to just interact with other people, which in itself was quite dangerous because you didn't know who they were. But now it's just, you know, this kind of unregulated content that's all over there. There's very little viewer discretion. And, you know, a lot of children have now signed up to apps like these for that specific reason. And that's something that's, you know, really stood out to me. But I've never, and I know that obviously in the grand scheme of education and teaching, I'm only one person. And by all means, I'm sure there are loads of teachers who've had different experiences to me. But I couldn't imagine any of the girls in my class making a reference to, you know, using X for watching pornography in the way that it's kind of normal for boys to laugh about what they access on the internet. And I think that's why maybe girls fall through the cracks. And I agree with you, Ray. That there probably are girls that are accessing this also, but I just think they're a lot more quiet about it, and then it's missed by staff and by wider data.
Yeah,
Well,
and then the number of sorry, Lucy, the number of boys that have been that have said sexualized, inappropriate comments or made overtly sexist remarks to girls has drastically increased. And that's not just coming from me. I worked at a girls' school for 11 years, so my experience teaching boys is far more limited than that in terms of noticing patterns over time. But speaking to my colleagues, and even what I've noticed from my experiences in my PGCE 15 years ago to teaching boys properly for the first time 4 years ago to now, it's shocking, the difference, like the number of boys just making comments as if it was nothing, or not realizing how inappropriate what they're saying actually is, or the flip side of that, deliberately antagonizing female students and saying inappropriate things to be abusive.
And how did the girls react to that? Because I remember in one particular lesson, a boy said something that was really, really inappropriate. And it was I was just had two students that I was doing some sort of close work with. And both the girl and I were straight at him, you know. In fact, I had to stop because she was doing an amazing job. She absolutely rejected the way that he'd spoken, his attitude, and really sort of, you know, he was embarrassed actually. But if that had been in a wider classroom, I wonder what the reaction would have been, you know, in terms of other boys' sort of attitude towards that, you know. So are we finding that girls tolerate it, or do they tend to pick up on it as well? Are they, you know, because at the end of the day, if boys are behaving like that, and is left just to teachers, because you're at the front line, you're the people who are there in the classrooms who are seeing this and having to tackle it, whether you like it or not, then we've got to find ways around this. We know there are lots and lots of boys who probably who recognize that this is wrong, who don't want to join in with that. So what are those differences? And what are the differences between attitudes, and can we see a common thread, between the types of boys that are more likely to fall into this pattern of behavior?
I think it's an extremely intimidating environment for a girl to go through, or any child actually. And I think whether or not they challenge it depends on, I feel like that part will be as good as the SLTR and what the whole school culture is on that.
Yeah.
I think the schools that say, like, I remember when, I don't know if you guys heard of it, Everyone's Invited, that website, where what basically happened was, I think children made it, I'm not sure, but basically it was a platform that was made where you could basically name a school if you've been a victim of any kind of sexual assault or harassment there. And I remember coming back to school one year on Inset Day in September, and we'd been told that loads of the schools in the local area, including ours, had been mentioned on there. And so from that point forward, we had to take a safeguarding approach where we shouldn't assume that, sexual harassment and assault can happen here. We should assume that it does. And we should take it, have zero tolerance and tackle it from there. And I feel like if you're in a school where these things are discussed, teachers aren't taking it personally, and they're thinking, they're communicating to the children, they're not shying away from it. I think then maybe you have children who would be more inclined to come forward. But I think a lot of the time when a child wants to report something, whatever it is that they've been a victim of in school, I think a lot of the time they'll think about, what's in it for me, or what are the potential ramifications for me. And I think that can scare a lot of children. And so if as a teacher, like, it's amazing that you did that, Lucy, and I love that. And I can imagine that girl that was your student probably felt encouraged by the fact that you also responded. For me, I just think we have to be in a place where, and this isn't a criticism of schools, I couldn't imagine there is a school that doesn't take sexual abuse seriously, but I think we have to be in a place where, even if it isn't the responsibility of schools, there still has to be a reaction to it. And all children have to be encouraged to come forward, and there have to be consequences for, whether it's a comment or whether it's an action or whatever. Like, I feel like there has to be a known consequence that all children, a clear line that they know. And that's the only way that children are going to be able to always come forward in such an intimidating scenario.
Yeah.
Need a smarter way to teach? Wish your lessons had more impact? Eduflix.com. Stream educational films for teachers and students in or out of the classroom. Keep students engaged. No ads. No distractions. Try it free for 30 days at eduflix.com/try. Use code TTR. Get 50% off all orders made before June 1st. eduflix.com.
Hi secondary school teachers, we're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculums. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org.
Did you know that every year, half of disadvantaged children who are top attainers at primary school don't go on to achieve top GCSE maths results? At Axiom Maths, we exist to change that. Our fully funded programme helps schools nurture young mathematicians through weekly face-to-face maths circles, where pupils tackle challenging and exciting problems outside the national curriculum. With just under £3,000 annual funding, expert training and quality resources, we give schools everything they need to inspire the next generation of mathematical thinkers. Want to make a difference? Visit axiommaths.com today and join over 400 schools delivering maths circles across the UK.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy.
And of course, that's the
only
SLT
way.
culture and
Yeah.
the culture of behaviour in the school is enormous, because if you're in a school where they are onto these things, where they have very well tested pathways to deal with these issues, then I think obviously it's going to work. But in schools where, dare I say, where you've got teachers who sort of go, right, buddy, what have you done? Let's go in and speak to Miss and see what's happened. That kind of thing isn't the culture that you need, because you're instantly belittled and put in a place where you know that anything you do isn't going to work. And we hear about schools that are like that. So we don't want schools to have to be the places that tackle this, but these are the schools are the places where they see it the most. Parents don't necessarily recognise in their children, perhaps, or they don't spend enough time with their children to see it. That it's a sort of a peer culture, isn't it? So whether we like it or not, we've got to deal with it. But do we feel that perhaps there should be intervention from outside, from the Department for Education? Should they be looking at different ideas, again, smartphone access for young people? Or do you feel that it is the access to the information on phones that's fueling this?
Yes, I think it is. I think that the fact that social media apps aren't regulated, there's just this like plaster put on everything where you're told you have to be 13 and above to access certain apps, and yet almost every child I know that's younger than that has these apps unless their parents have intervened. So I think, to me, again, it's just the government out of touch, and once again putting unnecessary pressure on schools. I'm happy to see that it's something that they're addressing, but again, as you've both said, it's not something that schools can deal with as a standalone. And I think there needs to be more accountability for the people that run and own these social media apps and what they're allowing to be posted. And the fact that children are able to access this, like once upon a time on X, if something harmful or abusive was posted, it would almost always disappear if somebody reported it. And now it doesn't. Like I've noticed if I tweet something random about school, I'll have all these bots, replying, encouraging you to send them a direct message. And it's just like, what happened? So
Elon Musk happened.
Half my age. Like, I just feel like it's a complete brain rot, and it's honestly really concerning. Like, I think the people that run these social media sites should also be accountable. And I don't think it's good enough to just say, well, this is for, 13 plus and, viewer discretion is advised. But that's not enough, because we all know that children will cross boundaries if they're left unregulated. But then again, I think if there is any group that can really help schools, it's parents. When children are outside of school, I could spend all day not letting any child on their phone. But what about when they leave after school? What are their families doing? What are the people, their carers, doing to ensure that they're not browsing anything that they shouldn't be? There are so many parental controls that you can put on Wi-Fi and on devices, screen time. There are so many features that didn't exist when I was a child that now exist, and you can even use your Wi-Fi to check which websites have been accessed or which social media sites have been accessed on your Wi-Fi. There's so many things parents can do now. And I think parents, a lot of them, I feel like have good intentions and maybe just aren't educated on what it is that they can actually do. And so maybe that's something the government should look to as well, offering this training to parents, making, disseminating information so that it's widespread and well known amongst families. I think that would also help.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think social media corporations need to do more to get rid of the harmful, violent, offensive, etc. content on their sites, not just for children, but for all of us, because no one needs to see that stuff. No one wants to see that stuff. There are too many bots. There's too much, like, there's just, it's ridiculous. It's a joke. And so it's not just for the children's sake that more controls need to be put in place. But also as consumers, I'm really tired of us complaining about it and still using them. Like we complain about it and say, this is horrible. And then we go and we update it's ridiculous. We need to actually do more against it. But anyway, regarding the children, to me, it is the parents. It's the same thing. Filmmakers, they make a film and it's decided that it's a 15. Okay. And that is produced and that is distributed and people can buy it and access it and stream it and whatever. It's not the filmmaker's fault if a parent lets their 6-year-old child watch that 15 rated film. Once that thing is made and that thing is done and that thing is created and it's been decided and it's been labeled and everybody knows that's a 15, it is not like, you don't get to complain to the producers that Sally down the road let her 6-year-old watch that film. That's Sally's fault and that's Sally's problem. And I'm tired of everyone on earth being asked to parent a child except the parents. I'm tired of the village getting blamed for the parents not doing their job. And I don't agree that parents don't know what's out there and what's going on. Schools tell parents, we send emails, there are newsletters, there are information packs, there are information evenings and welcome to school, here's how to do your job days. We do everything that we can. And I feel like the information is out there. They can find anything in the world. They can order anything. They can book anything. They can figure it out if they wanted to. I genuinely believe, like, yes, they're well-intentioned because parents generally love their children more than life itself, but they're not doing their jobs properly. And I don't think that's anyone else's fault. Like, yes, it's a collective responsibility because this is clearly a societal problem. It's too widespread and it's too common for it not to be. So we do need to take steps honestly, I don't know realistically what those steps are to get parents to do what they're supposed to be doing, because I'm 37 years old. Okay. I'm the same age as a lot of the parents of the students in my school. So we were raised, granted, in different countries, which is actually not an excuse because my country technically is a developing country where I grew up and y'all are from England. So definitely not an excuse. We grew up in the same time, in the same years. And if I know how to figure out parental controls, if I know that they exist, so does Sally down the road. So I'm so tired of everyone. I'm ranting now. I'm just so tired of parents. I'm so tired of parents not parenting and it coming back on everyone else.
I totally agree
to do their
with
job
you.
better.
I completely agree. So I have 3 children, but they're all adults now. And so my sons, who are 26 and 23, refer to their 18-year-old sister as being from the iPad generation because they feel a generation apart. Because although they had rudimentary phones, there was some group chat thing they used to be on. I don't even know what it was, but it was like a messenger type thing. What was it?
Was it on a BlackBerry?
No, it was on, but you could use it on computers and things as well. And that was the
MSN.
first. The MSN,
Probably.
that's the one, yeah. So they had MSN, and that was just messaging their friends through, their computers or whatever, if they had access to phones. But they were a lot later having a phone. Their phones, these awful things that didn't scroll the screen very well. It was very rudimentary. By the time their sister was old enough, she had access to a phone. There was TikTok used to be called Musical.ly, and she downloaded it despite me saying she wasn't allowed to have it because I'd heard bad things about it. So I had to take it off. And so it was a constant situation of having to watch. Let me look at your phone. What have you got on there? And when you've got parents who don't either know how to parent, or because when they become teenagers, they become completely different people, and those people that used to go,
Mhm.
you're cheeky, suddenly become very, very hard. And getting the phone off them can be really tricky, and I think a lot of parents just feel, well, I can't do anything about it. And I mean, it's great to hear about the parental controls over internet access, because that wasn't around even when my daughter was young enough to have a phone but not old enough to be going on it without us knowing what she was doing. There wasn't really that. I feel that that's sort of just starting to come out now. I think that there's a lot of work being done to restrict access for children, but of course it's still got 5G, and I don't even know how you deal with that. I'm so glad that I've got out of it at this stage, if you see what I mean, because I think
Yeah.
parenting children now, although when you give your child a phone and you say for the first time, you say, right, you can have a phone, but you can only use it between the hours of, because I've set the Wi-Fi settings. I guess they grow up with that as an expectation. But wrangling a phone off a child who hasn't finished yet, everyone else is still on it. I've been there, and it's it's another fight that you have to have. But parents have to have that fight. They have to push it on their children that they are in charge, and that their children can't just access the phone, access the internet, and do as they please. And it's hard. It's really hard. Like you said, all the parenting classes that schools offer, the advice, information, emails that come out. But is everyone reading it? Does that information get through to the people who most need it? And that's the issue. I think we all agree parents are the key to this, really.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think as well, I think the parents least likely to come to a parental engagement session are probably the ones that need that information the most, and they're like likely to attend. I agree with that. And I also wanted to say, I don't think that this like unregulated social media only fuels misogyny and like violence or sexual assault. It's actually responsible for a lot of things: bullying, fights. The amount of exclusion panels I've sat on or been involved in where it's been an argument that started on Snapchat or on Instagram comments or a group chat. There's actually so much that's actually just happening in the virtual world that carries over into schools now.
Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like it's a really hard time to be a child. Like, there's loads of amazing things out there, and technology's made a lot of things a lot easier, but actually it's quite scary as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. And actually, another thing that I might add to your list of things that sort of get to young people on phones, for girls in particular, and that's what I was saying, that actually we watch what boys are doing, and ignore the girls at our peril, because the information that they're being fed back, vacuosity, it's all about how you look, and, girls who were getting up at 5:30, they were so tired because they had to put all their makeup on and stick on eyelashes and stuff like that, because they feel like they've got to have that Instagram face every time they leave the house, and that was more important than anything else. And so I think actually, there is an issue with what girls are being fed, and whether that feeds into that misogyny in a way where girls are playing into the role of the Barbie doll kind of thing, that I'm just a body, and and again, it's not all girls, it's not all boys, and I think that's the thing. And I think you hit it on the head, Yasmin, when you said that the parents who need that information are the ones who don't access it, and the children who most need the PSHE, which we're not well equipped to teach. I don't think a lot of it, it should be done by specialists who really know what they're doing, and not a half-hour briefing on the day of the PSHE and some papers handed out and some links that don't work and all of that kind of stuff that we've all seen. It's really important that we get this message across, but half the kids that most need to listen are the ones who get sent out because they're messing around, or they just don't listen, or so how do you get to those is the issue. And I suppose that's where government steps in with smartphone bans and things like that to make sure that where those children who don't have that guidance, I'm not in favour of banning things, but I do feel that might be the way we have to go.
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. And just a reminder that the show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Should we move on to the next topic? I think, Ray, this one is yours.
Yeah, so I came across a story this is from Virginia in the States, but it speaks to a lot of issues that are happening over here in the UK. So on Wednesday, there was a fight between students, and one of the students, this is in a high school in Virginia, one of the students ended up getting stabbed. And it came out later in the week as the week progressed, and students were giving statements and to the media and their families and so on about what actually happened, that there were some members of staff allegedly just standing there and not intervening, possibly earlier on before it escalated to the point that somebody was stabbed with a knife and there were hundreds of students around, and it all became totally unmanageable. And then parents were getting angry and questioning and speaking to the media about what was going on in the school, that teachers, who are paid to keep their children safe, which is weird. I thought I was paid to teach about apostrophes, are not intervening in these physical fights and stopping it before it got to that point. And I've had so many conversations. I taught in London for 13 years, and now in the Midlands, where weirdly, well, I guess it's not weirdly, but the school I'm at now has the fewest fights I've ever seen. And the worst fights I've ever seen were in that all-girls school, because girls fight to kill. They will see red and aim for murder. And there have been times when it's been absolutely brutal. No one's gotten stabbed, but there have been so many fights that I've had to physically intervene in, and staff have had to or not. Staff have felt deeply uncomfortable about it. And when you witness your colleague intervening in a fight, and then the parents coming in the next day screaming, "Miss so-and-so laid her hand on my child, you have no right to touch my child," and suddenly that member of staff has to be investigated for using reasonable force. It's all very, very complex. And obviously the students and the parents of the students in Virginia speaking out and asking questions that fairly need to be asked, of course. Probably not to the media and not the way that they're being asked, but these are questions that need to be asked about staff involvement and what led to what. It's just raised all my feelings about what our role actually is. Are we trained for that? I don't feel that the typical teacher is trained adequately in restraint or physical force. I don't feel like we are provided with enough guidance and enough support if we do intervene in fights. I've done it multiple times in spite of that, but I've also not done it when I felt that I wasn't safe to do so. And I've seen the consequences of staff intervening and parents deciding to try and ruin someone's career as a consequence. So what I have feelings. And one recent conversation in a staff room, it was decided basically, if you are behavior support, like you are hired to support with student behavior, obviously you receive extra more training in that type of thing than the average class teacher does. Or if you are SLT, there seems to be an expectation that you just don't consider your own physical safety. Your job, your job is to dive in regardless of the situation and the context. Whereas class teachers don't have that expectation, but also if we do intervene and something happens, we could be in trouble. If we don't intervene, we're in trouble. If we do, and how is the average person meant to judge where that line is? What is reasonable? What is excessive? What is messing around? What is dangerous? Does anyone have a knife in their pocket? Because I don't have X-ray vision. So how do we decide these things and make decisions that are going to protect the students and keep them safe, but also keep ourselves safe and not destroy our careers?
Yeah. I think, honestly, Ray, I saw that story as well. And honestly, I share so many of your sentiments. Like, I think when I saw it, I just thought, when I saw what happened, and then I saw was it the media or the parents outside, I saw the statement that the school had basically blamed the teacher that I walked past or whatever. And I just remember thinking, teachers, exactly as you said, it's like they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. And for me, what I always think of, I've been to 4 schools, and aside from one, which was a pupil referral unit and wasn't mainstream, I have never been told what I should do if I come across a student that's in a fight or students that are fighting. And it's almost like that kind of bystander effect. Like I remember the first time I saw a fight in school, I didn't want to get involved because they were at the edge of a staircase, and I just thought, what if I try help them and I fall down? Like I started to have intrusive thoughts, and I just thought I can't be involved. And then every other time I just, tried my best to help. But exactly as you said, if you don't help, you can get in massive trouble. If a child was to get injured, there'll be, questions, whether it's from the family or whoever, or the school. And if you do get involved, you can easily be accused of, assault or, handling a pupil in quite a rough way. And either way, it's just a really daunting position to be in as a teacher. But to me, I just think, what are schools doing? Like, most schools do have fights. Like, when are SLT going to decide, well, actually, when is it going to become part of inset day to actually address, preemptively, that there may be students who fight, and this is what we want you to do? Because you might be in a place where there is no SLT nearby, or there is no behavior mentor nearby. So what then? What if a fight breaks out in your classroom? You then are the most senior person there. So, I think schools need to start addressing this. And honestly, it made me really angry to see that the teacher even though it is a bit scary to know that a teacher can, just walk. But I didn't see the actual footage. But I mean,
no, I haven't either.
Online, I wouldn't want to ever see that. But I think what is sad about that is, since when was it a teacher's responsibility to break up a fight? There's a difference between a responsibility or being, compelled to do something and doing something out of goodwill because you care about the safeguarding and well-being of the children. There is a difference. You can be accountable for one, but not the other. And, I just think that it's a really sad position. And I think, to me, it speaks a lot to when anytime a school's under pressure or under fire from the public or the media, they often resort to blaming their teachers. Like, they feel outnumbered by the public, so then they go and outnumber whichever member of staff's involved. And I just think that happens a lot of the time. Would that teacher really have faced the same criticism if the public and the media didn't get involved? So that's what I was thinking about when I saw this. But I think to tackle this, schools need to actually start addressing that. They need a policy on what their staff are meant to do.
Yeah.
So go on.
I was just going to say, schools are great at scapegoating. Schools are great at scapegoating, and it's just so good at it. And it's very, very, very frustrating when it's like you've had to make a decision in the moment when there's absolute chaos going on, and there are young people's physical safety is at risk, and your physical safety is at risk. And like, how is any human being, except someone who's been training and been doing this for years, meant to make the perfect decision about this? And yet it's I've seen the scapegoating happen so many times. Sorry, Lucy, go on.
No, it's fine. So I was going to say, so I did receive training at my school, a number of years ago. About halfway through the time that I was there, we had I think it was 2 days or 2 afternoons or something, 2 big sessions, and we were taught about things like soft C's. So you have your hands like that. You shouldn't grab, for example. So you've got to keep your hands, and we were demonstrated. We all had to sort of shake each other around with soft C's to show that would work and that you could restrain someone. I'm still not convinced that at 5'1", 5'2", if you've got 2 sort of 6-foot students or even just one of them involved in a fight, that I would even be able to get any soft C's around any useful, sort of, because you're looking at upper shoulder grip. Do you see what I mean? Because that's where you can control somebody, and and it's just I have never ever had to intervene physically in a fight. I never have. So I'm very grateful for that. But, we've got to remember that we have teachers who are older, who might not feel confident about intervening. We have teachers who, we are humans. We may have broken our arm or, be recovering from that, had an operation, pregnancy, any of those things. Even if you haven't, at the end of the day, in that story that you cite, one of the students was stabbed. And so that could have been somebody was going to be at the end of that knife, and the implication is it should have been at the teacher at the end of that knife and not the student. And
that's always the implication.
I'm not sure. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not certain that is the way. I'm not saying anybody should be at the end of a knife, but there are some serious issues when children are going to school with knives, and we know that they do, and maybe people would feel more confident if they didn't think that there could be a blade whipped out at some point. So again, it comes down to that, for me, that idea, do we need to have students go through a metal detector to check whether they have bladed items with them that could cause that? Because if you knew you were working in a school where a student couldn't bring a knife in, then I guess you might feel more comfortable about stepping in and trying to stop something. But the expectation that teachers are, because they are older, they are in charge. Well, when you're a teenager and you're furious about something and you're ramped up for a fight, it doesn't matter how grown up somebody is, they are not going to be able to stop that very easily, and it is a question of judgment over safety.
I want to say, Lucy, I also did that training when I was in the pupil referral unit.
Yeah.
But I just felt like that training only applies to primary school. Like I'm quite short as well. I'm, and I'm only 50 kilos. So like, I just feel like I wouldn't have the strength. Like most teenagers are taller than me. And like, I just would not be able to get a grip on them that's soft enough to stop them. Maybe if they were primary school size, yes. But
absolutely
not the average child I look up to in secondary school. Yep. So like, I just knew if there was a fight that was going to break out, it wasn't going to be me that was going to be particularly helpful. And also in terms of metal detectors, we had that in the same school. And one day I remember I had to go visit another school in the morning. So I was a little bit late to school, like a planned kind of absence.
Yeah.
And as I was driving up the road, I saw a bunch of our students basically getting knives out and putting them in recycling bins in like random people's front gardens on their way to school. So it's called like parking your knife. So you leave it there because you're going through a metal detector. So to me, I honestly couldn't believe what I was seeing. And like I was just driving by and I did actually speak to them and put my window down. So like I made it known that I saw them and obviously reported it at school. But to me, sometimes I feel like having knife arches can actually still put children in the same danger. Like, yes, they're more likely to be safe during the school day. But what happens when there are knives buried in soil or in recycling bins a few, tens of meters from your school gates? What then happens if someone's really, really angry at somebody else and now there are no staff and there's no school environment to stop an escalation? And honestly, I felt really like on edge a lot of the time where I just kind of used to think like I just couldn't forget it. Like I've left that school and I still can't forget it. But I just think sometimes even knife arches, like children will still find a way around them. Yes, inside of the gate will be safer. But what about
for the purposes of this story or for this scenario where we're talking about whether teachers should be stepping in and intervening, breaking up fights, and at the end of the day, the fury in that story was the fact that eventually a child was stabbed.
Need a smarter way to teach? Wish your lessons had more impact? Eduflix.com. Stream educational films for teachers and students in or out of the classroom. Keep students engaged. No ads, no distractions. Try it free for 30 days at eduflix.com/try. Use code TTR. Get 50% off all orders made before June 1st. Eduflix.com.
Hi secondary school teachers, we're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculums. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org.
Did you know that every year, half of disadvantaged children who are top attainers at primary school don't go on to achieve top GCSE maths results? At Axiom Maths, we exist to change that. Our fully funded program helps schools nurture young mathematicians through weekly face-to-face maths circles, where pupils tackle challenging and exciting problems outside the national curriculum. With just under £3,000 annual funding, expert training and quality resources, we give schools everything they need to inspire the next generation of mathematical thinkers. Want to make a difference? Visit axiommaths.com today and join over 400 schools delivering math circles across the UK.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy.
And that was the worst thing, because fights used to be very common in my school, and but if there's a knife at the end of it, then it becomes so much more serious. We can't account for what kids do out of schools. That is the parents' role. And if we're talking strictly about protecting children when they're at school, which is what Ray, you said, that was what you thought. You were there to teach apostrophes, but no, your role is actually to keep the children safe.
Obviously, to keep them safe. Yes.
Yeah. Then the kids taking their knives. I mean, I didn't know about parking their knives, but that would make sense that you put it somewhere and then you pick it up on the way back. But who's in charge then? And at least if they're out in the open, passing if there's a fight, and the whole bystander effect we see now, people are more like to film it, I guess, than intervene.
Right, and there are usually two ways that things escalate to that point of somebody getting stabbed in school, and one is it's planned. Yep. They've planned to go after this kid. They've planned to do as much damage as they possibly can. They've brought the knife in, or they're going to use something. If a teenager plans to do something, good luck. They will find a way to do it. If they plan to cause injury to somebody else, they will find a way. If they plan to sneak out or run away, they will find a way. If they plan to never do a work, they will not do it. Like, if it's planned and intentional, good luck. There are knives in food tech. They will find a way. But I think the arches are meant to stop the second reason, which is just the red mist and the escalation and the heat of the moment. They didn't plan for this to happen, but now they're angry and they've lost control. Yeah. And if you reduce the weapons that they can physically have on them, the access to more dangerous things, that drastically reduces that second type of injury and that second type of escalation. So it's not going to solve anything, and it's certainly not necessarily even helping anything outside of school. It possibly is making it worse. But as you said, Yasmin, but it's reducing. If you can reduce through metal detectors and so on, any weapons that they can have on them, you're going to have far, far, far fewer incidents of that second type of attack.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And that's why I said, yes, you're going to make the inside of the gate safer. And that's a great thing, but the only reason I raised it is because I think when a child leaves, walks straight out of school and they haven't even gotten to the bus stop and gone home yet, but they've picked up a knife on the way, I think in my mind, I don't really see it as this, line where, the child's now stepped outside of the gate and now they're the responsibility of their parents. I mean, technically they are. And technically, if you're in public, we've got the police and we've got all sorts of things that should really be stepping up and contributing. But I was only raising it because I think for me, I see, like, as I've been SLT before, we do duty walks. Why do we do it? It isn't important if the local area and the surrounding roads around school aren't still a part of, the school community. So the only reason I raised it is because I just sometimes have concerns that, yes, you might reduce the chance of a knife incident happening in school. And I mean impacting children, not the teachers, but impacting the children. But those knife arches, the only reason I raise it is because the main thing that to me is happening is you're just kicking the can further down the road or down the day, in that there might still be something really serious that happens after school. And so what could be done to tackle that? But I was just kind of thinking out loud.
Or a small child or someone else could pick up a knife. Like, they've just deposited these deadly weapons in the community where, like, innocent, uninvolved people can get injured or find them.
And same, even though it's not, I know this is so off topic now, but they used to do the same with vapes as well, because metal detectors are meant to pick up vapes because they've got metal in them, but they would put them in their shoes because you take your shoes off before you're scanned, or it wouldn't beep because the scanner, whichever part is detecting the metal, kind of stops when it comes to your shoes. Or a lot of trainers have like a little metal bit in the laces. So when if you use a wand, it would beep and they'll be like, oh, that's the metal bit in my shoe. But actually it's the giant vape and the THC that's under their sock. So a lot of the time they bury them outside school. And, I was honestly fascinated by that whole year.
Yeah, that's is an issue, actually, the responsibility outside of the school when we've had antisocial behaviour from students outside of the school, after school or before school. Generally the school, because I've dealt with a few cases, because I'm a local councillor where I live, and people have said, the kids keep kicking the same door every night when they go past. It's the same group of students, and the school say it's outside of the school building, so we can't deal with it. Bullying, for example, when that happens, to a student, if it happened outside the school are reluctant to take on incidents unless they have an absolute relation to something within the school. But generally, again, because of that capacity to be able to do everything that it needs to be done in education, teaching apostrophes, as you've said, things like that is the key role of education. And so to start policing what happens outside of school is a step beyond. And again, it goes back, doesn't it? It goes back, and everything goes back to parents initially, and what children are being exposed to. Because I don't know, I couldn't put a number on it, but there was a time when children didn't take knives to school. There was a time when children would take a penknife because they wanted to show people their new penknife or something, but nobody felt worried about it. But I know, put it back in your bag. You don't need to show that now. And nowadays, anything that could be used as a weapon. So where have we, again? Where is the idea coming from? And it goes back. When I was at my school, we had issues with certain specific issues with behaviour. And we thought it was just our school. But the more I spoke to parents and students in other schools, friends and their children and things, I found out it was happening at theirs as well. And then on the Edu Twitter, as it is, I suppose it's Edux now or something. But on that, people would be saying the same thing again. And I would think, wow, you've got mobs of kids roaming the corridors of this school and behaving. And actually, what it turned out, these ideas are being spread through the internet. So, like you say, if you want to knife someone, if your school's got a knife arch, go in the night before, find somewhere in the, in the fence where you can put a knife through, and then you can collect it once you're inside. So, kids will find ways around things, and all of these issues are being spread more, I think, rather than being contained in a school. So you might have had a school where a student had a knife and that would have been a problem and it would have been dealt with. That story spreads, and then other kids get the idea and they think, wow, I could do that. That would be really good, because that would teach so and so a lesson when they're, like kicking a chair. I don't know. I don't even know what makes somebody think this is the point where I have to stab you now. I don't understand what that mentality is, but it's there and it's embedded in culture now, and it's just another layer of problem that has fallen upon schools to deal with. And so, like you said at the beginning, Ray, you go into school to teach, but the expectation is that you're there to keep children safe, and teaching should inherently keep children safe, because they're in a classroom, they're within the school confines, they're risk assessed, everything, and yet we're finding that safety within school is not assured in the way that it was in the past.
No, and
so,
of course we're all meant to keep children safe, but I feel like because that's such an important that is the most important thing that we do before anything else, is so many things get pushed under that rug, like get stacked under that umbrella. You have to monitor students' social media, you have to, this thing happened, they weren't in uniform, it was on a Saturday and it was nowhere near school, but they're both your students, so you're going to deal with this now. I've seen that so many times. I've had so many when I was a head of year at a school in London, there were so many conflicts with social workers and police and parents and so many things, because they kept trying to get us to deal with whatever that means, things that had literally nothing whatsoever to, the only relevance was that one or both of the students went to our school. It had nothing to do with us, and yet we were expected to deal with this because it was a dangerous situation and we had to keep our students safe. Like, keeping kids safe when they're 10 miles away on a Saturday, that is not on us.
No,
ever.
Not at all.
Ever. Educating them about how to keep themselves safe, that is, but what they get up to, because it's such an important thing, that's the excuse. That's always the excuse. The safety of the students, the safety of the students. And you feel like you can't argue back against that without saying, oh, I don't care about the safety of my students. Like, they put you in an impossible situation.
Yeah. And it is unfair. Would you step in? Would you step in any fight? Would you evaluate? No, exactly.
I would absolutely evaluate. Yeah.
Exactly. And so again, it's the judgment and to bear responsibility for an outcome, like in the school in Virginia, I think is really unfair on that teacher. It depends how much they were watching, mind you. Did they run for help? Did they go, or did they just watch and think, oh, another fight, and wander on?
Or were they doing the thing that I know? So if this, basically my rule of thumb is, if the students are smaller than I am and I can lift them, you're getting carried. I will separate them. If they're bigger than I am, I'm not getting involved. What I do is I move everyone else away. My responsibility is clearing the area, and shouting for someone else to go get support while I clear the room.
Yeah. That's really important.
So maybe he was doing that. Maybe he was. Who knows? We don't know. We haven't heard a story yet.
No, and we haven't. But this is, you're right. It happened in America. It could have happened anywhere, absolutely anywhere, and it's that preparation and that awareness that could be a situation that you face, and also knowing the students. I guess that helps as well, because if you kind of look at them and you think look, these are just two kids who are having a tussle over a girl. I don't know whether that happens these days, but they're having a tussle over that, then and those students are probably not likely to carry a knife, then I guess that's one thing. But there were students at the school I taught in who I would have been quite not intimidated by, but I wouldn't have wanted to step in, if you see what I mean, because I wouldn't know what they could do. And we have to remember that when you are that angry, you have a strength that you wouldn't even normally have. So anybody wading in on that, unless they're sort of trained, and this is the thing, the police are trained, aren't they? The police are fully trained in how to do these things, but we're really being expected to police situations more and more. So I think we have to finish in a minute, don't we?
Let's wrap up there.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant.
Well, thanks, guys, and thanks to everyone that's listened.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.